بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. So in the last class we finished the Sifat Mutadadda. So we covered Hams Jahar, then Shidda Rakhawa Bayniya, then Isti'la and Istifal, then Itbaq and Infitah. So that completes the 4 pairs that we were talking about before. Now we move on to another pair of, or not pair, but another grouping of sifat, those that do not have opposites. These are going to be, as they state, characteristics of letters, but they don't have opposites, so it's just one grouping, and there's no term for the opposing group. So this starts with, let's write here, qualities without opposites. Without opposites. Okay, and the first one is going to be, all right, in English, safir, or in Arabic, with a sad, safir. So safir is going to be a sharpness in the sound of the letter produced from it passing through a tight passage. So when you have a lot of air coming through a very tight spot, it makes a very sharp sound. As you have a narrow opening, a lot of air coming through, it's going to make a sharp sound. This is found in 3 letters, Sad, Sin, and Zai. Sad, Sin, Zai. We usually say Za, but it's actually Zai. So Sad, Sin, and Zai. You can say Za, it's not a problem, but the way it's written is Zai. Right? There's a reason for it. I don't know if you guys want to know the reason for it. Yeah? You want to know the reason? So a long time ago, could be wrong, but from what I remember, there were no dots once upon a time. So Ra is like this. So they had to make sure, so this is Ra. And if there's no dots and you have Za, it's going to be that. So there's no way to tell the difference. There's no dots. So what they did is, that was Zai. Right? Zai. So you can tell the difference. Actually, even back then, they didn't even have Hamzas. Right? So that would be like Ra, and this would be Zai. But now that there's dots, it's not an issue, but the name of the letter has stuck. So it's Zai. So when you recite these 3 letters, there is a sharpness to it. When you say Sad, right? And when you say Sin, and when you say Za, z. Now to make it more clear, you have to kind of clean your mouth, right? There can't be like extra stuff in your mouth. And for those of you who are coming from like an Indo-Pak background, when people have, what do you call it? I'll say gua in my language, or supari, like pan, have pan in the mouth, and then they try to recite, they can't do it. It sounds like because there's stuff in the mouth. So the way you do safir nicely is you can't have too much saliva in the mouth. And then you have to position the tongue in between, basically the makhraj. Right? The makhraj of Sin, Za, and Sad is the same. You have to put the tip of the tongue in between the top of the bottom teeth and the bottom of the top teeth. Like here. When you do that, it's very sharp. It's not necessarily on it, it's not really touching it. So if your teeth is here, the tongue will be like right there. And then it makes that sharp sound. If you overdo it, then in English you call that a lisp, or someone's like, it's too sharp. It doesn't have to be that sharp. But Sin, Za, Sa. So that's it. Most people, they don't have an issue with this. The people who have an issue with this have an issue with the letter sin. It's called a lisp in English. I'm not sure if there are different categories of lisps. Some is too much, some is too less. Some will make it like a tha. They say, uh, sorry, I can't do it. Tha. You know, they can't say sin. That's because the makhraj is not right. But if you're putting the makhraj in the right place, that is going to come out. It takes some practice sometimes because when we're speaking our languages, it's because so many people speak these languages, it's okay and people let it slide when you're not really making it sharp. But in tajweed, you want to make it as sharp as possible. Let me see. Innahu, or let's see. I'm trying to think of a letter. Ihdina ihdina sira. Yeah, mustaqim, mus. اهدنا الصراط اهدنا الصراط المستقيم So you hear that sharpness. That is safir. So it takes some practicing. You have to listen to yourself. Hear if it's kind of fuzzy. These letters should not be fuzzy. Like اهدنا الصراط المستقيم Some people say مستقيم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. The reason for this is the tongue is too far back. You need to bring the tongue right next to the tip of the tongue needs to be right next to the edge of the bottom teeth. Then inshallah, if the makhraj is right, the sifa is not going to be too much of an issue. So that is safir. Not too much needs to be discussed here. It's just on an individual basis. If someone's having an issue, then we need to work with that person if they're having a lisp, etc. All of these can be corrected. Sometimes very difficult because if you've been talking a certain way since you were born, it's very difficult to change that. But it can be changed. It just requires your understanding because you have the muscles. Your tongue has the muscles there, so you can use it. It's just training. That is the first one. The second one is qalqalah. Qalqalah. Okay. And the letters for qalqalah is qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal, or also known with the acronym qutbu jaddin or qutbu jaddin. Yeah. So if you memorize the acronym, you'll know the letters of qalqalah. So what is qalqalah? In the book, he gives you like the literal meaning of qalqalah. What is the literal meaning of safir, by the way? Safir means to whistle. So there's this like poem, I believe it's called Sawtu Safir al-Bulbuli, the sound of the whistling or the chirping of the bulbul. Bulbul is a bird, like a nightingale, I believe. Bulbul. There's a poem, a very famous poem in Arabic regarding that. So it means like whistling. You could even say birds chirp. So safir can be used for chirping, but whistling is safir. Qalqala means it's like a movement that is a turbulent movement. Or in the book it says a disturbed movement. In Arabic, al-harakatul ittirabiyya. Like a rough movement, turbulent movement. That is the literal meaning of qalqala. Arabs use this word for when you're cooking with a pot and the water starts to boil. Yeah, the boiling of it, they use the word qalqala for that. So it's that, like, the bubbles and all of that, disturbed movement. Now we don't care about that, what it actually means, unless you're speaking Arabic, but it does apply into the definition. So the definition here is it is emitting the letter of qalqala when it is sakin by parting the two components of the articulating parts, not accompanied by any hint of a haraka out of the 3 harakat. Okay, so let me simplify what he means by that. So what is qalqala? He says when one of the letters of qalqala are sakin, so qutbu jaddin, any of them if they're sakin, he says by parting the 2 components of the articulating points, whatever letter it is. Now the articulation point is the makhraj. So for qaf, the articulation point is going to be the back end of the tongue and the palate. Those two, when they hit each other, right? So or when they move. It says here, إخراج الحرف المقلقل بالتباعد بين طرفي عضو النطق دون أن يصاحبه شائبة حركة من الحركات الثلاث. أق. So it is basically, let's take qaf for instance. When you say qaf or when you say aq, the qalqala, the back end of the tongue and the palate, let's say it's like this. Say aq. So it hits and then it separates. The separation is the qalqala. The hitting it is the haraka. Or actually, it's actually when it's sakin, you hit it. So when you say aq, when you do qaf sakin, aq, you're hitting it. Aq, and then the qa, that's the qalqala, the bounce, the separation. So you can call it, or you can say the definition of qalqala would be the sound of a haraka, or the sound of a letter of qalqala when it separates from the connection point. Let me write that here. This is just, me summarizing it. Okay. So inshallah, that's a definition for qalqala. The sound of a letter of qalqala, qutubu jaddin, when it separates from its articulation point. You can say a letter of qalqala that is sakin. That is sakin. Has to be sakin. Okay. So we could do it for all of them. So when the back of the tongue touches the palate, the top, that's that's qaf sakin. The qa, that that is that separation is the qalqala. You say al, that is basically the tongue coming to the palate in the front. Al, it's a bounce, that the separation of it. The coming together is the sakin. Al, the ba, the 2 lips. Ab, that's ba sakin. Ab is ba sakin. Aba, that is qalqala. Aba, aba. Right. We usually don't think about it that way because we learn it all together. But ba sakin is actually ab, that's ba sakin. And then the ba, that is the qalqala. Aba, aba, aba. Jim, the center of the tongue, touches the top. Aj, aj, aj. So the separation is the qalqala. You add your voice in that. Aj. And then dal, similar to ta. Ad, ad. Now he adds another aspect to it. He says it should not be accompanied by any hint of a haraka. So should not resemble a haraka. Let's write that as a note. He has it as part of the definition. Note. The qalqala should not resemble a haraka. Any haraka. All right, haraka in Arabic, so it'll fit. So the qalqala should not resemble any haraka. Okay, so what does that mean? If you say a qaf with a fatha, it's qa, 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 qa. Now, if I say aqa, 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 that's a fatha. Aqa is a fatha. That would be wrong. The sound of a qalqala is not the same as a fatha. Right? It's aqo, qo, qo. That's not a fatha. Fatha is qa. How do you guys do a nuraniya? Qa, fatha, qa. Right? I hear them teaching on Saturday. So it's not like qa. It's aqo. Nor should it be like a kasra. The problem some people make is the preceding haraka before the muqalqal letter sakin, they give some of that flavor into the qalqala. So if it's like this, if they say it's like this is not a word, but some people they say iti, iti, iti. That's like yeah, it's ito, ito. It's not ita. Ita is fatha. Iti, that's kasra. Iti is giving it like a flavor of kasra, kasra flavor. Iti, it's ito, ito, o, right? And if it's like it's not ubu, ubu. It's not u. It's uba, 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 uba. Right. So that's what he's saying here. It should not have any kind of resemblance of a haraka. Now in the book he goes into some depth regarding qalqala. That is not going to be necessary at this stage. This is actually like an intermediate to advanced level book because he doesn't leave anything out actually. But that is we don't need to go into that much detail. We just need to practice a little bit. I'll give you guys some practice examples. Yeah, so here he gives you some examples of when people do qalqala wrong. And I saw a video with Sheikh Ayman. He gave an example, and I think I was doing it wrong. These are like very intricate examples that we don't think of. The example is okay, mujrimun. So he says a lot of people when they're reading mujrimun, muj, muj. I forgot how he described it. It's like he's getting some of that dhamma, muj, mujrimun, muj. So supposed to mujrimun. But because we read it so fast, we don't care to give it that sound of a qalqala. It's supposed to sound like mujrimun, 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 instead of mujrimun or mujurimun. Right? So that's an example that he gave in a video that I saw of him. But here are some other examples that he gives in the book. لقد كان لقد كان. So the dal sakin. لقد لقد كان لقد كان لقد كان. Right. For instance, tubatum, tubatum. So it's not tubutum, tubutum. Some people say tubutum, tubu, tubu. There's no dhamma sound in there. Tuba, tubatum. So you will be able to do qalqala correctly when you focus on it. When you say, okay, I see the qalqala, I'm gonna do it. Otherwise, it becomes habit, and then you just give it the flavor of what is before it. Tubutum, Ibrahim, Iba, ba. Instead of Ibi, Ibrahim. I even heard someone say laqadi kana, laqadi kana. So laqad. Qalqala doesn't have any kind of change depending on the previous or haraka that's coming after. Okay, so here he gives some good advices. One is like that: don't mix a sound of a haraka into your qalqalas. Not even fatha. It's not a fatha. It's a and fatha is a. Second advice he gives is do not end the sound of a qalqala with a hamza. Very important. Qalqala is like, let's say, let me see if my drawing capabilities are good. I don't even know if this is how it's done. What's that? As a basketball. So when you throw the basketball, this is how we show that the basketball ball is being thrown. We do this. Being thrown down. This is speed marks. When the basketball hits the ground, this is how we do it. This is the basketball hitting the ground. So you see the boom. When the basketball hits the ground, the sound that comes out, it goes up and then the sound goes away. Right? The sound when the basketball hits, it makes an echo sound. Then it goes naturally away. In Arabic they call it yatalasha. It slowly dissipates. Right? For instance, there are some muds where you say it's not if you do like if you do ra like I was showing you, that's ra. And if you do it like this, that's ra, ra, ra. In English, you would say, like, you know how we have in our American accent, if we end off with a T, so there's a difference between hat and ha. So hat, that's actually a hamza. Ha. So what I'm trying to show you is that for a qalqala, you don't abruptly stop, you let it dissipate. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. The you don't do Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Ahad. You do ahad, you're adding a hamza to it. Ahad. Allahu samad. Samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. So if you stop abruptly like that, you're not allowing the full qalqala to come about. So think of it like a basketball. Let that sound be loud and then dissipate. Now you cannot stretch it either. It just has to be its duration. So قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ صَمَدُ. Yeah, just natural. It shouldn't be so short too, like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ. It's kind of too little. Give it enough time, but not that it becomes a full haraka either. Let the sound dissipate. So do not end the sound of a qalqala with a hamza. Don't do like this one. Do it like that. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ instead of قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. This requires a careful ear to see if it's an abrupt stop or a flow. So we're going to do two more and then we'll finish. You also cannot stretch. So the third advice. Okay, the first advice was do not give qalqala a sound of any haraka. The second advice is do not end the qalqala with a hamza sound, meaning a cut off. It should slowly dissipate. Don't cut it off. The third advice that he gives is do not stretch the sound of qalqala and prolong it excessively. Like, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ. Like some people, they go into their style and they want like, right? لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Right? Sounds cool. Maybe they got their own style, but that's not tajweed. He's doing an excessive qalqala. He's pulling it. There's no mud on the qalqala. So just a natural. Ahad, ahad, Allahu samad, samad. I feel like now I'm stretching it too. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ أَحَدٌ instead of ahad or ahad. Okay. Now, a fourth advice, the last advice he says, if you have a qalqala in between letters and you're not stopping on it, then don't allow the qalqala its full sound and then move on to the next letter. So this is like mujarimun. So allow the jim to have its full sound, like give it its right. Remember we said tajweed means i'ta'u kulli harfin haqqaha, giving every letter its right, because every letter of the Quran is from Allah, and we don't want to take the right of one letter and give it to another. We want all of them to have their own turn. So mujarimun, mujarimun. Instead of rushing through it, mujrimun, mujrimun, then the jim didn't get his qalqala. لقد كان, لقد كان. And this just requires a slow pace. Aram, like slowly, patiently read the Quran. If you rush, then of course you're gonna like eat up the qalqalas, because you're just trying to read really quickly. But if you go slow, then you can see the qalqala. You say, okay, let me just take my time, move on. لقد كان مجرمون قل هو الله أحد. But that's not in the middle of a word. Let me give you some examples. Let's erase the basketball. And remove the note. That was the first pointer. This one is the last. So he gives يقضي يبصرون يدخلون. And then the last one was what? يدخلون. Not يدخلون. Right? Yada. So for all of these, ensure that you're giving the qalqala its right. Like let the sound fully be expressed. Yaqadi, yaqadi, yaqadi. Not yaqadi. Yaqadi, it will be fatha, right? So yaqadi, yaqadi, yaqadi. Yubasirun, yubasirun. Instead of yubasirun, if you say yubasirun, yubasirun, so you're kind of taken away from the end of it. Yubasirun, yubasirun. This is actually very difficult because you have a slad, maksur, and then you have a full mouth ra. Yubasirun, so you have the qalqal on the ba and then a full mouth ra with a kasra slad before. It's a hard word. Yubasirun, yuba. Yubasirun. You have to be very cautious because any amount of elongation, then it becomes a haraka. Any detraction from it, then it becomes you're cutting it off. You just have to allow that sound to go and then you move on. Yubasirun. Like if you say yuba. So let that finish and then go to sirun. Yubasirun. Yadakhulun. If you cut it short, it would be yadakhulun. يدخلون, or if you do too long, يدخلون, it will become a fatha. So that's his fourth advice. When the qalqala is in the middle of a word, allow the full sound of the qalqala to come out, then move on. So don't overthink it as well. That would be my advice. Don't overthink it. When you overthink it, then you'll either stretch it out or make it too short. It'll become unnatural. The whole thing is qalqala is a very natural sound. It takes practice. You start practicing with just the qalqala sound, like aqo, ato, ab, aj, ad, qutubu jadin, aqo, ato, ab, aj, ad, like that. Right, so inshallah that is qalqala. There's still some more stuff regarding qalqala. He has levels of qalqala. He just makes it into two categories. Like there's a very strong qalqala and then there's a lesser qalqala. The strong one is going to be when it's like when you're doing waqf on it, when you stop on the letter, like al-falaq, falaq, muhit, muhit, kasab. There's one last point I want to make before we finish. Inshallah, we're on time. It's been 40 minutes. Qalqala, one way you can tell if you're doing qalqala right is the jaw should not move in qalqala. For harakas, the jaw, the lower part of your head, it will move. So if you say ba, ba, the lower part of the jaw moves. Ba, bi, bu. For qalqala, it's the jaw doesn't really move. Aqal, atal, ab, aj, ad. But if you say qa, ba, ja, ta, the jaw moves. That's a sign of qalqala. So inshallah next week we will continue on with the next characteristic of the letters. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.